Hey gang, thanks for tuning in. I'm doing this very, very special report on these late allegations, these crazy allegations against Vince McMahon. But I wanted to give you a heads up before we get started. There are some pretty crazy things in this story that unfortunately we have to go into some detail on. So please use discretion. Let's get started. This is the fall of Vince McMahon. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is part 8 of the fall of Vince McMahon. John Laurinatis enters the frame. Let's quickly review part 7. So in part 7, we talked about sort of the finalization of the groundwork that's laid for sex trafficking. We talked about the dreaded event in May of 2020 with the threesome and all the nastiness that came along with that. We talked about some of the explicit text messages that are shared between Grant and Vince, where we see multiple examples of her expressing that she's not interested in having anybody else in the bedroom, and him just continuing to exert control and to gain some sort of satisfaction from the control that he has over her. We see claimed injuries, significant injuries as a result of the sexual encounters that she's experiencing with Vince, and apparently with this third party, this physical therapist that's brought into the relationship. And you know, we just sort of, again, I keep saying escalation, but you know, things are continuing to get worse. They're continuing to get darker at this point in the story. Part 8, John Laurinatis enters the frame. So this covers basically late 2020, fall 2020, into the summer of 2021. This is a big stretch. This is, 9 months, 10 month stretch that this whole bit is covering. So the lawsuit claims that due to the obvious stresses of the situation, Grant's weight begins to really plummet, and now she's nearly 100 pounds. In November 21st, 2020, Grant is pressured to fulfill Vince's fantasy of a sexual encounter in the office. She resists, the lawsuit claims, but is terrified and complies. So I believe she's pulled into his private locker room at headquarters, and I believe they have sex on a massage table. Again, I say have sex. The underlying assumption there is that it's consensual. The lawsuit claims pretty clearly that it wasn't consensual. There's no way to know. I guess I'm just going to say sexual relations. Sexual relations were had between them on a massage table in Vince's private locker room at WWE headquarters. In that same month, November of 2020, Vince begins coaching Grant to make explicit content strictly for Laurinatis. So this is framed as, hey, I've got this guy, John Laurinatis. He's coming into town at this point. John Laurinatis is sort of traveling back and forth. I believe his wife is dealing with some pretty extensive health issues at this time. And they're kind of, he's kind of going back and forth to Connecticut and wherever he's from. And Vince is directing Grant to begin making explicit content specifically for John Laurinatis. I don't know if these requests come from John Laurinatis or if Vince is just speculating and he's telling her to do things without talking to John. That really isn't clear in the lawsuit. But she's doing things at the behest of Vince McMahon on behalf of John Laurinatis, is sort of the implication here. Grant is supplied with suggestions and even notes on what to do and what to say in this content. And throughout the whole process, Vince always serves as the go-between between Grant and Laurinatis. So at this point, at the beginning stages, it's not like, here's John's number, though it does get to that point. Vince is always the filter. This goes back to control. Vince is in full control of the communication between John and her and John. He's always the go-between. He's in control of what she does, how she does it, what information gets through, what information gets back. He becomes the conduit between Grant and John Laurinatis during this process. At the end of the year, 12/29/2020, a threesome is arranged at Vince's condo with John Laurinatis. Again, this is what is claimed in the lawsuit. Vince tells Grant to say she is a neighbor and a girlfriend working in the legal field, but outside of WWE. So this is the first meeting, presumably, at least in person, between Grant and Laurinatis. And according to the story, the threesome takes place. Once again, protection is requested by Grant, but none is provided. The lawsuit claims that Vince basically just says, hey, we're both clean, don't worry about it, and that's that. There is kind of an odd moment where I think she turns to John Laurinatis and says something like, has Vince brought you here before? Or something to that effect. Something to the effect of like, is this your first time? You know, kind of a thing like that. And John kind of looks at Vince in this funny way. Not exactly sure what is trying to be implied by that, or inferred, I guess, by that. But I would imagine something related to like, at least trying to hint at the fact that this is a recurring theme. That John's kind of like, you know, you haven't told this chick that we've done this a billion times before, kind of a thing. But that's kind of an awkward interaction that occurs. By all accounts, this is not a particularly abusive or a particularly difficult one for her. There's no reports of any defecating or any injuries or anything that comes as a result of this. A month later, January 25th, 2021, Grant is reassigned to support a new hire in the legal department. I believe this new hire is someone on the leadership team. Not like C-suite, not like C-level leadership, but leadership within the department. So she's in support of this new leader in the legal department. About 10 days later, on February 5th, Vince begins scheduling Grant's sexual encounters with other men. There is a snapshot in paragraph 158 of the filing. It's an interesting back and forth. It's like, it's very weird. It's very like, oh, how about Tuesday? Johnny really wants to see you on Tuesday. Like, it's kind of this, it's almost like this pimping, you know? Oh, Johnny really wants to see you on Tuesday. And it's like, oh, no, I can't, baby. I'm still too sore. How about next week? How about next Thursday or something like that? It's this very odd pimp and prostitute type dynamic that's being set up between the two of them. And I think that really exemplifies the level of control. I mean, it's the kind of complete and total control that you would expect a pimp to have over, you know, one of his prostitutes in this type of situation. A second threesome with Vince, Grant, and Laurinatis occurs about a month later. So this is March 6th of 2021. There is another threesome. So again, there's some significant space here. We've got that was the end of December. So now you got January and February. You know, you're looking at 8 to 10 weeks later, this next threesome is taking place. Then a few days later, on March 9th, Vince tells Grant that their relationship has been exposed to top executives and that it's delaying them from replacing a key high-ranking member of the legal department. So, in other words, Vince is saying, we're trying to hire this person in the legal department, to oversee the legal department. We can't do that because supposedly, people at the executive level know that you work in the legal department and we have this inappropriate relationship. Again, anything more than that is just speculation. That's all that's claimed in the lawsuit. So, Grant gets transferred into the talent relations department. Who oversees the talent relations department? John Laurinatis. Big surprise, right? John Laurinatis oversees the talent relations department. So, again, she's reporting directly to John Laurinatis in this particular role, putting her under even more of a microscope. I mean, this last boss she had in the legal department supposedly was, you know, a part of the Titan family or whatever, but at least he wasn't really around much. At least he was basically just someone to keep secrets. I mean, now you're literally putting her underneath somebody that she's having threesomes with, that Vince knows she's having threesomes with. Could it be that he was just giving her an excuse to justify his choice to move her under John Laurinatis? Like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to put you in this compromising position with John, but I kind of have to do it because, we can't, there's all these things that we can't do. That's just speculation at this point, but that's what happens. And the expectation continues to flow, that sexual activity and content flow from Grant to Vince and to John Laurinatis. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss, I guess is really the takeaway. The next day, on March 10th, 2021, Grant is moved into the talent relations department in an unidentified role. They don't know what it's going to be. Again, this is sort of the same way that she kind of originally got hired in the company. It's like, we don't know what this is yet, but we're moving you. There's almost like a sense of urgency to it. 6 days later, March 16th, 2021, Grant is told to, quote, serve herself to Laurinatis for breakfast at his hotel. So this is Vince communicating to her what the expectation is. Again, I mentioned the pimp-prostitute relationship that seems to be forming here, and this is probably one of the most explicit examples of it. This is him telling her, John's flying in, you need to meet him at this hotel, you need to meet him at his room, and you need to do whatever he wants. And again, this is during the period of time in which she reports directly to him at the company. So as bad as that is, it's even worse. The next month, in April of 2021, WWE's Senior Vice President of HR is let go. Also, Grant is told by Vince that she will be promoted to a VP of Operations role within the Talent Relations Department. So again, dangling that money, increasing the stakes, right? He's increased the stakes sexually dramatically, right? Now we're in a situation where he's literally like passing her around the company. Specifically to John Laurinatis, right? So he originally was imagining, right? If we go all the way back 3-4 episodes, he originally was just imagining himself passing her around. Then he was texting her that he wanted to pass her around. Then he was passing around her explicit content. Then he started bringing people into the bedroom. Then he started literally pimping her out. So as we've seen the escalation there, there's also an escalation in the requirements. So now she's going to become basically this senior vice president, this VP of operations inside the talent relations department. Very quickly, within a day or two, that expectation gets tempered by Vince when he basically tells her, like, hey, it's going to have to be a director role. It's going to have to be a director role. It's too suspicious. I can't take somebody that was basically a nobody, an assistant, with an unknown, non-clearly defined role with very little experience from the legal department just a couple of years ago, and catapult them all the way up to this vice president of operations type level. That's too suspicious. What we're going to do instead is we're going to reduce that down to a director level position to try to avoid the obvious suspicion that a promotion like that would cause. And they offer her a base salary of $200,000. So $75K to $200K. Wow. What an unbelievable increase. Obviously, like, what is that, 250% or something like that? 150 or 170%. Some insane increase like that. It's just nuts. John Laurinatis, according to this lawsuit, takes full advantage. Forcible touching at the office becomes common. Morning sexual encounters at John Laurinatis' hotel basically become normalized. It becomes the new normal. And the claim in the lawsuit is that WWE funds were used to pay for Laurinatis' hotel rooms during these forced sexual encounters. And that's how we get the sexual trafficking, right? If there's any kind of sexual quid pro quo associated with, and you're paying for that, right? Whether it's you paying for her to travel somewhere, whether it's you paying someone else to travel to her, that's trafficking, right? That's the movement. That's the movement associated with the sexual exploitation of someone else. That would be sex trafficking by definition. Stories of Grant's sexual interactions with others become a source of arousal for Vince. So Vince begins asking to hear about it, hear about the details of what goes on. Obviously, as you can imagine, this is incredibly disturbing and very uncomfortable for her overall. And I'm going to quote directly from paragraph 178 of the lawsuit. Quote, professionally and personally, Miss Grant's fate was entirely in the hands of McMahon, Laurinatis, and the other WWE executives who enabled her abuse. Close quote. I think that sort of perfectly sums up, in one sentence or less, the generalized claim of the lawsuit, which is he exerted control over her. Other people saw it, and that either contributed, like the lawsuit claims John Laurinatis did, and several other unnamed people in the process, the Titan family members, or they did nothing about it. They sat back and they watched it happen and they said, thank God it isn't me. All right, so fast forward now. I know the timeline's coming apart. We were in April. That was when the whole promoting to this director of operations level takes place. Fast forward a month, May 21st, 2021, Vince suggests that communication should be verbal and not written now, as one mistake could doom them all. So he continues to up the stakes professionally. The risk is getting higher, the temperature's getting higher and higher and higher, the pressure within the relationship is continuing to grow and grow and grow, and that pressure he's putting on her, okay, now we need to cut off any text messaging. I think he even cuts out even phone calls, emails, none of that stuff. We're talking face to face, and that's all that we are going to do. A month later, June 14th, 3 weeks later, June 14th, 2021, Grant requests no more sexual encounters with Laurinatis. Vince agrees, but says that the threesomes must continue. So, kind of an odd situation, it would seem, based off of the pattern of evidence that this lawsuit is indicating, that, again, it has more to do with Vince's satisfaction, that this is his way of negotiating, and again, continuing to exert whatever minuscule amount of control. Again, I say minuscule control. The control is overwhelming, but continuing to keep a foothold in every single aspect of her life. He doesn't give up a single inch without taking something else. And it would appear that he doesn't seem to give up anything that he isn't willing to give up from the very beginning. So that was a big one. That is part 8. John Laurinatis enters the frame. In the next part, in part 9, which is called The Assault at WWE Headquarters, we talk about a very specific event that occurs in June of 2021 that is alleged in the lawsuit of a violent sexual assault that takes place at WWE Headquarters with both Vince McMahon and John Laurinatis. So we will get into that next time. If you stuck with us this long, thank you very much. I hope that these videos are making things a little bit easier to take and a little bit easier to understand than sitting down and reading the legalese associated with the lawsuit filing. Please watch parts 1 through 8. If you hadn't yet, please keep up and you find this fascinating, and keep watching so we can keep wrestling with the business.